Hallo zusammen. My presentation is going to be in English, but please feel free to ask questions later in English or German. I'm happy to answer in any language. Anyone speaking Spanish, I can do that too. So the last couple of months were quite busy in my business, and it's one of the reasons is because we work a lot in cultural moments. So we had International Women's Day, we had Ramadan, we had Earth Day coming up, and so I did a lot of presentations, and at some point my head of design came to me and said, Sina, you gotta stop introducing yourself. Like, you gotta cut it down, it's too much, you have to come to the point, and you keep repeating the same thing in every single presentation, so just save your time. And she said, I have an idea of how to present yourself in a way that people understand and think about you anyways after 5 minutes. So here we go. Hi, my name is Sina Port, and I'm a professional troublemaker. Well, the reason why I'm a troublemaker, or why the work that we do a lot of times brings us into trouble, is because purpose, when people work with purpose, it leads them to do things that seem illogical or negative in the societies they live in. So I give you 3 examples that make you understand what I mean with this. Skipping school, not a very positive thing, right? Fridays for Future makes sense. Telling your customers not to buy your products. Okay, not a very positive thing to do in business, I would say. But Patagonia did this in 2013 when they said, don't buy this jacket. And it helped them support the environmental purpose to go through to a more circular economy. Helped them raise their profits from 500 million to 1 billion. By telling their consumers to do something that seems illogical in business. One last one, using 100% of your profits and giving them to your employees. I think business people here understand it's a very negative thing to do, shouldn't do that, but Dan Price did this in 2015 with his company Gravity Payments that I think many of us heard about, when he raised the minimum wage of all his employees to $70,000. And he had to use 100% of his profits, yearly profits at that time, which was 2 million, to do exactly that, to drive his purpose of raising the financial status of all his employees. And he tripled his top line revenue. So purpose makes people do irrational things, but that is why we are positive professional troublemakers. But let's go back a little bit and talk about what I actually studied and worked to do in the first place, which was, I have 10 years experience in brand image, creating a brand image, and I'm really good at making brands look really good, even if they're not, and that's something that marketers know, and that people have figured out a couple of years ago. Brand image is not always brand impact. It's not always the reality. We can make brands look really good, but should we make some brands look good? And that is why a couple of years ago I had to decide for myself to use that superpower, and I think we all have superpowers. Mine was making things look really, really good. To use that and make things look good that I believe in, causes and brands that drive purpose. And we know from psychology research that what motivates people is intrinsic motivation. And one of the 3 main factors of intrinsic motivation is, apart from autonomy and mastery, purpose. So purpose drives people to believe in a purpose, to work for a purpose, and to literally buy into a purpose. And that's why brands are moving from brand image, making brands look good, to brand impact. And brand impact essentially is moving from the impression of a brand and the reputation a brand has to the legacy a brand can leave behind. It's not do as I say, it's do as I do. And one of the things in brand impact that I find really interesting is that companies don't really think about going ahead of the marketing department, right? When I come from the marketing department, and one of the things as we do is communicate the value of the company, but we are not really in charge of creating the product or creating the actual value, we're just there to promote it. So one of the things in brand impact is the realization that it's the entire product to communication pipeline. It's not just what we see, and that's something that we figured out and consumers have figured out. Well, at the latest point 2 years ago, is the colorful images that you see on posters don't reflect the faces in the room, or that amazing sustainability campaign actually was created in factories that are known for child labor or slave labor. So what goes on behind the scene, that is brand impact, but people just see the image. So when we talk about purpose, where does it stand in the brand structure? We have the overall vision. Where is the brand headed to? We have the mission, is what do we have to do to get to that vision? We have the values, is how are we doing business to get to that vision? And the purpose, which has to do with why we actually do what we do. Why does a business, why does a brand put out that product or wants to be known as that kind of reputation? I want to play a little game, and that is called Guess the Purpose. And if you know the brand, which I show you the purpose of, just shout it out. If not, I'm going to reveal it anyways, so it doesn't even make any difference. Okay, we use ice cream to change the world. That is the purpose of which brand? Ben & Jerry's. Nice! You get some experts in the room. Ben & Jerry's. One of the ice cream brands that are not only known for the puns that they put on their ice cream, like Swirl the World and their environmental push, or Bernie's Yearnings, a fun, not too fun revolutionaries like Bernie Sanders, but they are also known for actually walking the talk. Ben & Jerry, founders of Ben & Jerry's, actually got arrested twice in the last 6 years. I don't know how you get to that point, while going on democratic protests. They actually do what they say their brand is all about. The next one, build the best product, cause unnecessary harm, use business to inspire, implement solutions to the environmental crisis. A little bit different, a little bit more difficult, but I dropped the name earlier. Patagonia, nice. Who said that? Nice one, very good, very good. Patagonia really got into the spotlight of a lot of sustainable fashion movement because of this campaign. Don't buy this jacket, but they also did other environmental campaigns, such as using 100% of their Black Friday sales to profit to invest into environmental causes and charities. The last one, for sports, we have the power to change lives. It's local. We probably, all of us, wear it once a week. I'm wearing it today. Adidas, yes. Very good. This is what we have the power to change lives. They are known for one of the pushes towards sustainable sports clothing, which they presented with one of their missions is to help end plastic waste, which they also presented in front of the United Nations, but also their campaigns around diversity and inclusion. So we've already talked a little bit about what purpose is by just looking at the examples. And we also heard about this before. Purpose is both, we had the look at the profit, people, planet, but when I work with purpose, I focus a lot on people and planet. So that's a good thing to remember, the 3 Ps. People, when we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also safety and well-being of the people, not only in the offices, but in the factories and behind the scenes. And when we talk about planet, of course, sustainability. Now, these slides are for those who want to sell the idea to people who are very numerical. And it's good to have that data to know why purpose matters for brands and businesses. It's not just nice to have and we're having fun being revolutionaries, but it actually helps business. 74% of Gen Z and Gen Y demand, not want, demand a brand to have a sense of purpose. When we go to younger generations, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, this percentage rises to 93%. 50% of Gen Z and Gen Y are willing to pay a premium, so pay more for brands that have a sense of purpose. And again, when we go to younger generations, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, this goes up to 87%. Companies with a strong sense of purpose also outperform their competition by 5 to 7% every year. So, purpose means profits. But it doesn't only matter to consumers and customers, it also matters to talents and investors. Making a difference is 2 times more important than higher salary. Should I repeat that? Making a difference is 2 times more important for employees than having a higher salary. So working for a purpose is much more important than what am I making, going into a company every day where I don't really know why I get up and I don't even know why I'm there, and that's at any other company. Why is it important for investors? ESG funds, which are environmental social governance funds, and funds that have a strong sense of purpose and movement into social struggles, are worth 25 trillion by 2025. And Larry Fink, founder of BlackRock, the biggest asset management fund in the world, actually said he's going to prioritize ESG companies as well as purpose-driven companies, saying without a sense of purpose, no company can achieve its full potential. But I don't want to only talk about why it's important. I want to give you steps that you can apply, whether you have a personal brand, whether you have a small business, or whether you're working for a large corporation. And you can apply to actually bring brand impact into your business and brand. So the how. Number 1, inclusive storytelling. One of the things that we see a lot in purpose brand campaigns is, we are the voice of the voiceless. Everyone has a voice. That's the start of it. Let's establish that everyone has a voice, but not everyone has the platform to make that voice heard. And this is where brands come in. This is where brands can offer their platforms, offer their reach, and offer their standing in their industry, as well as in the mind of the consumer, to spotlight people, creatives, as well as activists and smaller brands, to be inclusive. This is one brand that I had the pleasure to interview in my podcast, the Shared Diversity podcast, and it's a Scandinavian rental-only couture brand. This was the feature in Vogue Scandinavia, and it's created by Louise Sin. She's Chinese-born, went to Scandinavia, creating this sustainable couture brand. And one of the things that she did when we talk about inclusive storytelling is she understood that she has a point of view as a business owner and a brand owner, and she wants to bring that to the world. So specifically about creating fashion that doesn't harm the environment or people. However, another thing that she did was, instead of bringing a bunch of models in her clothes and speaking about what she cares about, she used that platform to amplify what they cared about. So she used models that had a sense of purpose and gave her platform for them to talk about what matters to them. And this is a photo of her SS21 runway show featured in Vogue, looking at the different pieces and the different statements those models were sharing with her that they wanted a bigger audience for. And it was actually the first time that a major fashion magazine created a platform for social justice issues. Next, collaborative partnerships. This, I have to say, is one of the most important. 2 weeks ago, I was at the TikTok launch in Germany, in Berlin, and I met a lot of TikTokers that have 5 to 7 million followers on TikTok. And I'm sure you heard about the platform. It looks kind of like this. And one of the things that I knew before, but what got really into reality there was, we have a social movement towards not only influencers, but culture creators. And that is the big difference between the Gen Y generation and the Gen Z generation. We have Instagram influencers. And here's the difference between influencers and creators, just a quick overview. Influencers have a large following on social media, and they get sponsored by brands to talk about how amazing their brands are. So they influence their followers to buy those brands. Creators, they're not dependent on brands to sponsor them. Creators create culture, they create an idea. They create community around a shared mindset, or in other words, purpose. And this is what we see on platforms like TikTok, where we can see creators talk about, this is what you should look out for if you want to see if a brand is sustainable or not. This is what you need to know about this and that brand. Or even movements towards creating a circular society themselves, thrifting clothes, mending your clothes instead of throwing them away, as well as connecting social justice and communities that are often underrepresented, communities of color, indigenous communities, to the movement. So I'm giving the example of sustainable fashion because it kind of runs as a red thread through the entire presentation. But this is one of the movements that is going on, apart from a lot of others. So one of the things that brands have to realize is really going away from, I'm going to sponsor this influencer, to I'm going to partner with this creator, because that creator has credibility. A lot of times brands have the problem that they want to stand for something. We want to create a solution for the Black community, but you have no credibility in that community. How come, like, you're going to say something, but you are not sure that the community is actually going to receive it? It's not just about ticking boxes. It's about making sure that when you come to the community, it is not exploitative. We want to sell to you, we want to tap into your market, but it's actually a service offering. We offer you solutions to the problems you're often experiencing, and that's why you need to partner with creators who have credibility in their communities and let them take the lead. Solution-oriented inclusion. I mean, this is at the core of anything related to purpose. This is one of the quotes that I love reading. The world's biggest problems are the world's biggest business opportunities. It's not only about talking to us about what matters to you and how you want to be inclusive of communities. It's about understanding how can you design solutions to the problems communities are facing. Equitable representation, providing power, your power, and reach to platform other people's work. 2 weeks ago, I had the honor to be featured in Vogue Germany, and I used the platform to talk about ethical fashion, sustainable fashion. But what I didn't realize was afterwards, I received a lot of messages from young women saying, seeing someone who looks like me in the biggest fashion magazine in the world, that changed the perception of how far I can go, how I am not defined by what other people think about my headscarf or about the color of my skin or even my gender. It's about how and what I can share with the world. So equitable representation means understanding, again, the entire pipeline of who's behind designing the product. And one of the things that I have really a privilege of is that I have a large social media following, but I'm also working with brands. So whenever I bring out a product or I talk about a campaign, I get a lot of private messages saying, were you part of this from the beginning? Who was behind this? Who designed it? Who was behind the camera? Who helped the models get ready? They want to know, people want to know who's behind the scene. They don't want to just listen to another, inclusion campaign. They want to know if the entire pipeline was represented, where the community was represented along the journey. And sustainable solutions. One of the things when we talk about purpose, we talk about people and planet. But a lot of times brands look at that as two separate things. Oh, today we're going to talk about sustainability, tomorrow we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we have to have two different strategies for this. But the reason why we need to bring this together is because inclusion, inclusive hiring practices, making sure there's equity in the companies, so people actually get their voice heard in the moments and in the places where it matters. Diversity and equity inclusion can't be effective without being sustainable. They can't just be a one-off, here we are, super diverse, we made it. It has to become sustainable, and sustainability practices are not effective if they're not inclusive. If you're selling a shoe to a community that can't afford the shoe, they're going to go to another brand and, again, talk about this throwing away economy instead of supporting communities with shoes that are sustainable, that they can actually afford. So understanding that sustainability practices have to be inclusive to be effective as well. And again, there are no behind the scenes. I think everyone saw this meme at some point on LinkedIn or Twitter. Companies were committed to diversity. The diversity is at the bottom of the hierarchy, meaning at the point where decisions are being made, there's no representation. So the culture, the community can't tell the people in power what to do because they're not in the rooms where decisions are being made. So when we talk about inclusive design, when we talk about purpose design, it has to come into the culture and into the structure of how you do business and not just how your brand image is seen. And I said earlier, we're moving from brand image to brand impact, but kind of lied to you because brand image still exists, but brand image is brand impact. We don't care about what you present anymore, we care about what you're actually about. Where is the solution you're providing? So when we look at from brand image to brand impact, this is the same. There's no internal, there's no external. I've worked with brands in corporate communication, just internal communication, communicating to employees, and external, which is PR and brand communication. However, there's no internal anymore. The information will come out at some point. We've seen it 2 years ago. And you might not want it, and you might put in the contract that employees can't talk about what happens inside the company, but it's not going to prevent those informations to come out. It's not going to prevent me going to my friend and saying, you shouldn't work with this brand, because I had horrible experiences, and then she tells it to her friend that was thinking about working with that brand. And the same when it comes to influencers and models and people you work with, photographers, anyone who has a connection to your brand, understand that brand image is brand impact. I'm happy to get any questions from anyone of you, especially different languages, whatever you like, German, English. Feel free to ask questions.
Wow, that was impressive. Thank you so much. The real problem here is we can't see you. Anyone?
Yes, over there.
My question would be, how far do you think we already are with the different people from different ethnic groups in design right now, and how the new generation is going to impact that?
How the new generation is going to impact that?
Yes.
Okay, so you asked how far we already are in terms of including different people's identities?
Yes, sure.
Okay, so when we look at diversity, equity, inclusion, we understand that I think all of us have kind of went to that learning curve. The diversity is different identities. Inclusion is if those identities actually feel like their opinion matters, and equity is creating policies and systems around having everyone have the same starting line or same access to opportunities. So one of the things that I work with brands, I always connect them to communities, because the reason why my brand is called Shared Diversity is because I believe that one of the things that we all share is our innate diversity. You have like a lot of identities, you may be having, multiple ethnic backgrounds, experiences and passions, and that is what connects us all. So when we look, I specifically work with companies first of all on establishing diversity dimensions, which goes from age, gender, sexual orientation, faith, socioeconomic ability, all those diversity dimensions, but also understanding that there's intersectionality, right? So there are communities, there might be, a person affected by different types of these diverse dimensions. They might, be a very diverse person. So some of the projects that I work on are modest fashion and making sure that there's, fashion for any kind of style. So Muslim women are often the target market, but I have to go to companies and say, listen, the Muslim consumer market is not all the same. We always talk about Arab consumer, but there's also Muslims in Africa, Asia, here in Europe, America, and they are diverse within themselves. They might have different preferences of clothing, they might wear the headscarf or might not, and there is an innate diversity within them. So one of the things that I always do is connect brands with the communities directly. And one of the most recent examples of that really spiraling into something that we've never imagined is when we came up with a modest swimsuit, and we asked the community, hey, how do you want the swimsuit to be in. They said, listen, you need to understand that women want to cover for different reasons. I have a friend who looks for inclusive sizing, who's plus size and who wants to cover out of personal preference. I have a friend who has a disability and wants to cover that. I have a friend who has a skin condition. That's why she needs a swimsuit that protects her from the sun. So we ended up with a campaign that was much more inclusive than the brand initially said they wanted to do. They just wanted to, tap into the Muslim consumer market. But it's wider because the solution applies to much more people than you initially thought. So that is one of the things that I always do, is when we work with brands, connect them directly to communities, because they have the insights into their culture and how they want things to be seen, other than the brand having a top-down perspective.
Sina Port. I was just wondering, when you mentioned purpose is also profit, could purpose be the ultimate marketing tool for, future companies to exploit their people?
For sure. So that is when we talk about brand image and brand impact, right? A lot of times purpose is being used as a tool to promote something that the company wants the consumer to see. But now with the drive per purpose, it's definitely one of the biggest drivers of marketing, but it goes much deeper. It goes into marketing is not only how you communicate it, but what happens behind the scenes, and that has to be visible, and consumers are actually demanding to be visible and authentic. So it is a marketing tool to drive consumer behavior, but the consumers are the ones directing how that marketing tool is being used, and that is the most powerful.
Das war fantastisch. Großartig. Sina Port, wir gehen jetzt in eine kleine Pause und sagen nochmal vielen Dank.
Danke.